So welcome back to the Dogs and Deadlifts podcast. Today we have all the way from Ireland, Dr. Conor Brady from, I was going to say Raw Feeding Dogs bookmate.
Yeah, very close. Feeding Dogs is the book. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. Dublin, I tell everybody Dublin because it's the place they know in Ireland, but it's Wicklow, just below Dublin. But this is a Dublin accent you're listening to. Absolutely.
And it's a little bit early to crack a Guinness over there, is it?
It is absolutely, yeah, tempting as it is, because we're still in lockdown. You got away with it for some reason, but everything has been taken away from us. So the Guinness at home is very tempting when the pubs are closed.
Fantastic. Look, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to have a chat. I know that you're super busy, and like I said, I just really want to say thank you very much, for taking the time.
Yeah, I love the opportunity, man. I could talk this all day, and I just know from talking to you already that you're the same. So I just can't. I love meeting people. I do this all day if I didn't have to make a living. So
no, look, I hear you. I definitely hear you. So Dr. Conor, for those out there, obviously we'll talk about your latest book and things like that very shortly. But can we sort of dial it back and get a bit of a an introduction to about yourself? Going back to whether you university, whatever you want to go back to, mate.
So I had the normal upbringing of dog nuts. You grow up with the dogs around the house and at your feet, and I was looking after them. That was my job. 5 boys in the family, and so very attached to them and working in animal shelters. So it led me into college doing zoology, and I did a doctorate then studying the effects of nutrition on behaviour of group living mammals. So I very quickly got hooked on the whole nutrition behaviour thing. I came out of college and I'm very lucky to get a job in Irish Guide Dogs as a pup supervisor. So 9 to 5 puppy immersion, if you can believe such a job exists. That's what I had. I had that job. Amazing. And you're learning from the very best trainers out there, and all was well. Then a job came up in Western Australia, in Perth in Western Australia. And I thought, well, walking the dogs in the sunshine is a hell of a lot more attractive than walking around in the snow at home. So I thought maybe I'll toddle on over there. So myself and Elaine went over, and I was working in Perth, and that's really where I hit the raw feeding wall in a big way. I was already experimenting and doing bits and pieces, and that was my role. But here I was, as a guide dog trainer then in WA, and a large amount of Australians, maybe 10-20%, were putting in raw meat into their bowls, maybe 30-40% real ingredients was one of the surveys I saw. So you meet, and then the raw fathers, we call them, Ian Billinghurst and Tom Lonsdale, 2 great vets, you guys, the Aussie vets, world respected, and I knew about their battle that they were fighting to get raw dog food back, and processed food repressed a bit, and you get talking to them. But it was really when I bumped into Brisbane Guide Dogs is when the eureka moment happened. That's when the apple hit me in the head. I met this CEO, Chris Lane, unbelievable woman, brilliant CEO of Brisbane Guide Dogs, and there's about 10, 12 guide dog schools in Australia, a couple of different umbrella companies, or charities. Brisbane Guide Dogs decided to change 180 dogs from cereal-based dry food to raw dog food. They'd already done a couple of small experiments, as you would. You're going to test the waters first before you jump in. And they were impressed by what they saw, which is what we say to every vet, as opposed to kind of shunning the idea. Just give it a go. Any dogs with recurring gut issues or skin conditions, just give it a go first before you say it definitely doesn't work. Be skeptical. Don't be cynical. So they make the leap, 180 dogs to raw dog food, and the transition is covered by the Courier Mail in Brisbane, and you can see that she said there was a 80,000 a year saving in veterinary bills after a couple of years. And when I saw that first really big test, nobody had ever proven that sort of stuff before, in non-scientific, it wasn't peer reviewed or anything, but that's enough for me. I see that and my tail's wagging furiously, and I go, okay, listen, this is it. I get all excited, and I'm like, this is what I was talking about. I was already doing a seminar in WA, talking to breeders and vets, and I got this information, went back to my superiors and said, look what Brisbane Guide Dogs is doing. Here's a charity saving this amount of money, which is massive, because every penny is hard earned as a charity. And we've got to do it. We're going to save a fortune, and the dogs are going to be healthier, which means I think the things they saved money on was recurring skin, ear and gut, as you'd expect, but also orthopedic surgery and consult, paying attention to use sporty doggies. So I was like, okay, very interesting. We've got to do this. And unfortunately, the guide dog school I was working with wasn't so keen, and I got in a huff, and I just said, listen, don't you know who I am? I know what I'm talking about. This is nutrition, and this is like obvious for us. We don't need to feed this stuff. We can feed that stuff and benefit. And more to the point, Brisbane guide dogs were so enthused with what they saw. They said, "Right, we're going to stick a badge on this raw dog. We're going to make our own raw dog food. Have it made by somebody else,
Yep.
obviously,
Yep.
white label if they call it, and we're going to stick a Brisbane guide dog's logo on it." I mean, what Brisbaneite is not going to buy this raw dog food if your guide dogs are feeding? I mean, if it's good enough for guide dogs, it's good enough for anybody. It's good enough for your mum. So this dog food, Leading Raw, took off 2009, and it was a really big seller in Australia, making Brisbane guide dogs great money, changing the lives of so many people that need a guide dog. I mean, winner. And then in 2015, Chris Lane was fired, and in came another CEO, and they brought with them back the dry dog food. And I have Chris quoted in my book there as saying she does believe it's because she was promoting raw dog food, and the CEO was happy to bring in dry dog food, which she wasn't happy to do. So could you imagine being her staff underneath her when the dogs were healthier on the raw dog food, and here comes dry dog food? It kind of implies that they mightn't be as healthy on the dry dog food. I'd love to mention brands, but I better not. So it was because nobody believed me. My superiors, the vets that I was working with in part, that they wouldn't believe me, that I said, I'll show you. And then 10 years later, I have a book to show them, so don't spur me, because I will get you back eventually. So that was really the start of it. Yeah, that was the start of it.
Awesome. And you know what? Like, I've got your book sitting here right next to me, mate. As you can see, there's,
good.
And I still fucked up the name. It's sitting right next to me. So once again, I'll throw out. I know. I apologize for that. I totally stuffed that one up. But
Don't worry about that.
I wanted to, obviously, like, I'm super excited to chat to you. I noticed, I've read. Most of the book obviously haven't. There's a lot of reference, a lot of good reference points there as well, which something that I really like. And for people out there, having those references to those studies and stuff is a fucking,
Yeah, it helps.
yeah.
Definitely helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
People need to see it. Now, people want to know.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about the science, but very few people see it. It's kind of like talking about the magic Oz, and then you really pull back the curtain sometimes, and you see this little fella pedaling a machine, and you kind of go, "Oh, that's the science you're talking about." So that's the sort of that's the dirt that I like digging up, and I kind of like shedding some light on things, because, as I say in the as a quote, I constantly say, once you see the magic show, you can't forget it. It's magic then, and it's not actually real. So that is the case with so many things, like why you feed carbohydrates, or this low protein norm that people are feeding their dogs, and every single factoid. I mean, even the fact that cereal-based pet food is a really good idea. I mean, what study did they base that opinion on? Because I haven't found it. There's not a single study in existence that indicates cereal-based pet food is better than a well-made raw dog food. So that there should be oodles of those studies if that was the case, but there isn't. There's only us being forced to prove that what they're doing is wrong. And the same approach was taken with big oil, cigarettes, breast milk, or the bottle milk thing. It's like, once they get that product on the market, you have to use science to get it off. And that's the thing. They use very flimsy, if at all, any science at all, to get there. And once they're there, you've got to use the best of science to prove them wrong. And that's where we are today. That's what the book is about.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about your Dragon's Den experience and things like that, very shortly. But I noticed obviously in the book as well that you mentioned obviously your experience here in Australia, and that there's a lot of things here that could kill you, but surely it wasn't it wasn't all doom and gloom living in Western Australia.
Man, it was the best life ever. I didn't want to come home ever. I adored Australia. I mean, and all my friends still live there. I mean, listen, Australia's been so good to the Irish, and when it was the New York for us, certainly in the crash, and thousands of us flocked there. And like, so us and the Aussies are very, very similar, and we get on well. But more to the point, you still had to take us in, and did. So like, I adore Australia. I love the lifestyle. I love the outdoor thing. I'm an outdoor person, so I loved all that. But it was you're called back to Ireland for a few different reasons. And we came back, and then once you're back here, you start having a few kids, and you just look back at your friends in Australia. They're sending you these pictures of barbecues. Like, do you know what always annoyed me now that I live in Ireland? It's like every third block in WA around Scarborough, where we lived, every third block is a big park. It's like it's just totally accepted as a normal thing for you Aussies. But like
Mm.
nobody else has that. Like nobody else has that land usage well laid out to the point that you have serious access to outdoor stuff. Maybe it's because of the weather; it's so hot and you
Yeah.
bloody need it. But like we don't have that here. Like, there's very few places you can walk your dogs off the lead in Ireland. People see Ireland as this mountainous and fields and stuff, and it is. But those
Yeah.
fields are owned, and there's sheep and cows in them. So there isn't a whole lot of places like Candy Cross and stuff
Mm,
that I know you're into, and my
mm,
friends are
mm.
too. You're picking some very select places that allow you to do it. It's not as open as you kind of feel Australia. So I miss
Mm.
Australia. I adore it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to clarify that though. It's a beautiful place here. I- and I
Yeah,
know, you mentioned once again in the book, you was having some problems as well, yeah, in regards to, just some, snoring, some health related problems,
yeah,
as
yeah,
well. And, there was a few things, I suppose, a few ducks lined up for that huge aha
yeah,
moment as well,
yeah.
um,
Yeah,
you know,
totally. That was it. I was in Australia when it happened, and I was poker nights, and you're playing out. So
mm,
at least once a week, and I was after poker nights. I was particularly stuffed up, but I wasn't stuffed up at home
mm,
before that I remember. But I was over here, and so very quickly diagnosed as gluten intolerant. I wasn't getting on with some gluten. I mean, I seem to get away with it. Some things, other things I don't.
yep,
Not a big issue. A bit of a snotty nose, bunged up ears, and I'm not going to write home about it.
mm,
It turns out I've since got knocked. My joints aren't brilliant. I've got thumbs that didn't heal. I've
mm,
torn my ACL 2 or 3 times. I've done things that probably shouldn't be happening as often as they do. So I'm starting to notice that maybe it does catch up with you a little bit earlier.
mm,
Kind of like smoking. Smoking doesn't get you in your 20s and 30s. If you want to see the effects of smoking, you pitch 11 smokers against 11 non-smokers and watch them in the second half. So that's kind of what's happening to me now. I suspect with gluten, either that or just my diet isn't very good or something. It's not a
that's
very good advert,
no,
but
no, all good.
but yeah, so it was when that hit me, and I kind of thought,
Mm,
if 30% of 30% of Europeans can't digest gluten very well,
mm,
40% of African Americans, because Africans generally, it's a continent with no wheat gluten. They eat sorghum and millet and these gluten-free cereals.
mm,
So 40% of African Americans suffer gluten, and maybe 50-60% of Aboriginal people, because that was a totally new introduction to them that they just started experiencing 150, 200 years ago. So this was interesting to me, and I thought, wow, the longer you've been exposed to wheat, the better you are at digesting it.
mm,
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And then you look at dogs, and you go, well, these are inveritable meat and bone eaters. Depending on people will scream at you, he's an omnivore, he's a carnivore. Listen, I deal with that in the first section of the book. I go into the diet studies. That's where I'm strong. And I
yep,
can tell you, to cut a very long story short, although we will return to the feral free roaming dog thing, because I know you've touched upon it earlier.
mm,
Dogs do eat a little bit of plant matter, but these are meat and bone eaters for the very large part.
mm,
So how the hell did this animal suddenly evolve to thrive on 50-60% wheat? I mean, how is that possible? How's he better than me?
yeah,
So when I was looking at my very itchy dogs in Perth, and I jumped them over to raw dog food, and their problems resolved. These are dogs on constant non-steroidal anti-inflammatory use, multiple vet visits, and 3 months after doing it with 6 or 7 dogs, whatever number it was, their vet visits just evaporate. And so I run back to the vet's show with my tail wagging again, as I keep saying, and I'm doing this little dance going, look, guys, I fixed the dogs. I got these dogs that you've had them on these treatments. And they were just like completely not nonplussed. They just had no interest in what I was saying. And
yep,
that's like, how could you, you're a scientist, man. How could you not think that this was really relevant? Then the
mm,
Brisbane Guide Dogs thing happened. And then boom, I was like, wow, there's something going on here.
yep.
And that's, yeah, so that was the start of it for sure. I know you're going to bring it up now, so I'm just going to have to say it.
You're
But
right.
the Dragon's Den thing. So I came back to have you watched it? You should
Yep.
have. You have. So I came back to Ireland, and I was, you're doing your seminars and nutrition, you're trying to get a bit of grounding, but it's hard to make a living from just doing seminars, and people aren't really picking up what I was putting down. So I said, okay, what? I'm going to show you, because there's these amazing raw dog foods in Australia, and I'm just going to do it over here and be rich. It's going to be simple. And there was maybe 3 or 4 licenses in the UK, and the stuff that was being sold at the time, I didn't see it as something I would personally feed. So I said, I can do better. And I always think I can do better. So I borrow money up the yin yang, and the government sponsors me, and suddenly I'm a raw dog food producer. That was 2 years of my life I'm not going to get back, man. That is hard graft. Maximum respect to anybody that manufactures anything. It's just so hard, particularly food, because you've got microbiology issues, you've got transport issues, it's frozen food, man. It was hard work. And then you have a market that goes, I don't want ground up raw chicken. You're going to kill my dog. And it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you don't even want this product after I spent all weekend making it. So anyway, I had a lucky chance. I knew the product was good. I knew I had a bit of a story, so I said, right, I'll send it in for the TV show Dragon's Den. And luckily enough, I got accepted. And the day of the pitch, actually, the handler, I was going to bring out Great Danes. Everyone's impressed by Great Danes, aren't they? Oh, well, amazing dog. Yeah, look at my food did. It just made a Great Dane. So the handler then rings me up in the morning, Caroline. She's bringing in that she's got stunning Great Danes, and she says, I can't remember his name, Orban, I think was his name, possibly. And he goes, look, Orban's not well, so he's like a 95 kilo, massive, muscly, beautiful looking black. And she goes, I've got this, his sister, who's also just beautiful, pretty. Bring her in, great. Okay, so she comes in. And we show her off, and I say, like, this is the sort of musculature you can expect when you eat, like, meat. You don't see guys going to the gym on 50-60% bread. I mean, you come on, you know this. And this is a meat and bone eater. They have just no physiological need for carbs, and you want to look like that, you got to eat right. So we send them back down the stairs, and then one of the dragons goes, bring him back up, let's see him eat the food. And I'm like, no, she's not here to eat the food. Cameras, the food's been sitting out for 2 or 3 hours. And it's like, no, forget it. No, I'm not. And I'm not stupid. I've done this sort of stuff before. So it's like, not exactly, but it's like, I knew not to bring the dog up. I fought it. They don't show any of that. They just show me going, oh, okay, I'll bring this out. I'll show you. I'll bring the dog up, bring her up to the food. Do you reckon she's going to eat the food? Not a chance of it. So I don't know how many people, hundreds of thousands, millions, I don't know, have seen that. And it's like, oh shit. And they were just loving a TV goal because there's the dog not eating the food I'm trying to sell them. So that was a really bad start. But actually, I kind of knew that would be good for me because I knew that they were going to use that a lot. And if I could just put out a good pitch after that, I'd be okay. And so the pitch went well. I got the investment, and on we went.
100%. And I wanted to I've watched it as you mentioned. The lady, I forget her name off the top of my head, but
Ramona.
Yes, that's correct. I thought she was going to vomit and pass out.
How rude. How bloody rude. I mean, I've seen some things that want to make me vomit, but you just don't do it in public, do you? I mean, you just hold it in. So, look, again, I think that was for the Ramona's grand, but I just think it was for the cameras. We were at an after party then, and, there's a huge Irish wolfhound walking around, and she just looks at the dog and she totally doesn't mind. And yet she has a repulsion.
I thought it was hilarious, mate. You did very, in the clip, you did very well. You pitched it. You're like, but I always, as you mentioned, between her wanting to throw up and then, the dog not eating I was like, oh, damn it, but look at that, almost 10 years later, and like you said, up yours. This is
it's working now. I was going to come back to that. I know you had mentioned on it earlier and you're interested to hear, but like the diet studies are really interesting of dogs. And when people start screaming at carnivore, omnivore, like they rarely, it's in this yes or no world we live now in social media, and it's like, yes, it's right, no, it's wrong. You were wrong, and there's no space for, there's no grayness, there's no space for kind of to develop a point at all. And science, it can be wrong sometimes. And so anyway, with the diet studies, people can hold up a diet study of a dog eating 40-50% plant matter and say, I told you the dog's an omnivore. And I can hold up a study that shows the dog is eating 97% animal matter. And I can say, look, I told you he was a carnivore. So what's the difference there? And the difference is but there's a few different reasons. I mean, it depends how you analyze the dog. What you really want is, unfortunately, a dead dog and a stomach sample from him. That's the real proper, because if you analyze poo, plant matter gets overrepresented in poo because it's harder to digest, as opposed to like chicken breast meat or something which you digest all of. So anyway, you get a lot of plant matter in poo. It can be a bit more difficult to understand what the ratio was to meat and plant. Anyway, so it happens that a lot of the studies are coming from poor regions of Italy, Zimbabwe, Brazil, where the roaming laws are kind of lax, and the dogs are allowed free to roam and feed on dumps and stuff, and they come back to their owners at nighttime. And poorer people don't waste meat matter on dogs. They eat every single bit of it themselves, and they give leftover plant matter to the dogs. So these dogs are being fed salsa and porridge and stuff at nighttime, and during the day, the authors were saying they would top up their feed in protein reserves by eating meat and actually a lot of human poo from the dumps. Up to 25% in Zimbabwe of their diet was human poo for protein. So this was kind of interesting to me, and it was kind of a light bulb moment, because when I compared that to the feral dog studies, truly feral dogs, you don't see them. You haven't seen them. They're aggressive to humans. They're a proper, wild animal. And truly feral dogs, they have very carnivorous diets. Every sort of analysis of them would agree. When they live beside or amongst wolves, it really wrecks geneticists' heads because they can't tell the difference between their poo samples. So identical kind of diet, very closely diet. Now, dogs eat different types of animals to wolves. Wolves are big game hunters, hunting in core coordinated packs. Dogs don't have any of that. You let them in amongst sheep and they're just dickheads running around yipping and barking, but they will exhaust those sheep and they will take terrible advantage of them. And, so what dogs will do is what they want is, your non-flying kiwi birds, your lizards, your rabbits, your rats that they can dig out, small little animals and carcass. They are carcass hunters better than they can outcompete vultures. So we know the studies overall, the first section would summarize that, look, this is very largely a meat and bone eater. If you look at the biology of the animal and the structure of him and how he's set up, and everything about him, from his hinged jaw and the shape of his teeth to his digestion, his acidity, the short, rapid kind of intestines and those cecum, everything about the dog is geared up to eat meat and bone with a little bit of plant matter. And there is a couple of other little things that are thrown in there to muddy the waters with carbohydrates. And when do we use carbohydrates, which is getting into this kind of sporting dogs bit. But it's like, yes, there is some evidence that dogs have taken tiny evolutionary steps towards carbohydrate digestion. That's absolute fact. We've known since 2013, the Swedish study where they looked at the genes amylase production, which is an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates. And they looked at this enzyme production in the pancreas of these dogs and said, right, do dogs have more of this amylase than other animals? And what they found was, yes, dogs that grew up with farmers, which is most of them, have more copies of this gene for amylase production. And you wouldn't have evolved those genes if you weren't being fed carbohydrates, because you wouldn't have needed it. You only evolve what you need. So that makes sense. But other breeds like huskies and Akitas didn't evolve that gene out at all. They've got similar amounts to dingoes and stuff. So because they grew up beside nomadic people that ate much higher meat diets and didn't rear crops. So yes, tiny amounts of this stuff has been fed to dogs, and they have taken small steps, but not steps like that has changed the structure of the dog, the gut of the dog, the fact that they will happily live in ketosis. They've got no physiological need for a single bit of carbohydrate at any stage. When you read the giant Bibles written by the pet food companies, the actual bits on carbohydrate requirements are like 2 or 3 paragraphs. In a 1,300-page book, I've got 2 or 3 paragraphs on 50-60% of your food. And it says, in some studies, it suggests that carbohydrates may be beneficial. Really, really crappy, loose words. And you look at these studies, and it's a study of reproducing bitches where they either give them carbohydrates or extremely high fat diets. And the extremely high fat diets obliterate the pups. And the carbohydrates drop the fat content a bit. And they say, see, carbohydrates may be beneficial. And I'd say, no, why didn't you just use protein instead of fat? So this very confused bit of science in this small little dark realm of the book, and then on we go to the next thing. It's like, no, come back to that, please, and let's investigate. Are carbohydrates useful at all? We don't have any evidence of that. We have a huge amount of greyhounds running on carbohydrates and stuff and all sorts of things, but as we were just talking about at the start, we've got too few people analyzing that. So the carbohydrate usage thing is it's really the next frontier. It's like, as you were telling me, the types of dogs that are being used in canicross, and I was telling you the dogs that I tried up in Norway, it's like these are hybrid dogs of greyhound stroke lurcher stroke a northern breed to a stroke a breed I've never seen. And my little dogs that were pulling my poor unfortunate weight around were about, I would say maybe 20 to 30 kilos maximum, and I'm overestimating there because I'm assuming a hell of a lot of it was muscle. It would have to be, but these weren't big dogs. They weren't the Siberian Huskies that I saw in the Cinderella movies, or whatever. This was not what I imagined. I was cold and it was hard work and I was sweating. So yeah, I think it's interesting that the next frontier will be, okay, we know we've evolved these dogs. We've genetically manipulated these dogs to run faster, to sprinting animals. They were never sprinting ambush killers before. Big cats are ambush killers. A lot of intensive exercise in a short duration and they're gone. Dogs and wolves are long distance running animals. I will pursue you until you fall over. That's what I will do. So they pick out the weak and the old and the dying, and because they know they'll fall over first. So dogs will do that, and now they're long dogs now just have large home ranges for digging out bits of animals. They need huge ranges to keep them going. So now we've got these greyhounds that are fast sprinters, and they've got this fast twitch muscles, and they operate in a slightly different way. So now what we want to know is, me and you, Dan, are going to find out what's the crack, how much of this, how much carbohydrates are needed at what point, are they needed at all? Because we've got greyhound teams now that aren't feeding carbohydrates, and they're like, for long distance, nobody disagrees. Even the top sled dogs, the idiotrog guys, and human long distance runners, ultramarathon runners, are all running on fat.
Yep.
Fat is the way you do long distance exercise. That's the glycolytic system. That's the way you need to do it. We've got that absolutely drum tight in humans.
Mhm.
Why would that be the case in a meat and bone eater? So that's where we are on all that. So
Yeah.
sorry for that big long spiel, but
No,
it's
no, all
interesting.
good, all good.
Mm.
I agree. It's certainly interesting, and we're so, look, if we take, if we take greyhounds, because that's I suppose the first thing that pops into
Yeah,
my head. Most people think greyhounds are your sprinters. Your huskies and your sled dogs are your long distance dogs. Yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot more in between.
mm,
Especially your agility dogs. Your flyball dogs. Your candy cross
yeah.
dogs. Your mushing dogs. There's a heap, in between. But most people
Types.
take
Yeah,
the extremes, right? You've got
yeah,
the greyhound or the long distance mushing dogs,
yeah,
and a lot at the moment is just not known, and on
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's what we're here, we're talking, hopefully, for our listeners out there, educating and going, holy shit, just even
yeah,
if it's one little thing to go, oh, I'll think about this, um,
yeah.
but getting them, to do or participate in the study, as we spoke about before, is like a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's not you are not allowed to experiment on dogs like I thought you were. Like I'm through social media, I got a Facebook page. You find me on Facebook, Dogs First.
Yep.
And I do experiments all the time, but it's really simple. Like, guys, take this and analyze that and then tell me how much of that salty water they drank. We'll talk about the salty water experiment in a sec.
Yep.
And so you can do that kind of stuff loosely. That's treading a very fine line, because while I can go to the vets and say, take his bloods, I want to check his vitamin levels. Good idea, everybody, now and again, once a year. It's like doing a car check every year. You just check where your dog is,
Mhm.
as opposed to just blindly putting in these supplements and hoping your dog needs X or Y.
Mhm.
Just do a blood sample. How's the vitamin D3, most important? So
Mhm.
uh, when you are doing that for your own dog for a health reason, that's fine.
Mhm.
People can even euthanize their pets if they wanted to. But if at any stage you say you're doing an experiment on a dog and you take that blood because you want, even though I ask you, Dan, take your dog down to the vets after a period of exercise and take the bloods, I'm
Mhm.
now doing an experiment, and you are now crossed into an ethics world where you must apply to your local Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons in Australia and the UK, and you've got an ethics committee, which is mega complicated and laborious and expensive to do. So it
Mhm.
actually takes years to get a study like that off the ground to get permission to experiment on the dogs. So
Mhm.
one of the reasons we don't have this stuff is because you're not allowed to do invasive techniques on dogs as part of experiment. You are, but it takes a lot of effort. So things like monitoring things on the outside, monitoring metabolites in urine, monitoring breath analysis would be great. I would love that, because metabolites come out and you can get so much information out of it. And poo is a great one, so you can get all sorts of biome stuff and digestion and byproducts and things that come out from overexertion and things like that. So that kind of stuff is fantastic. You can use that, but it does hobble you a bit for the real nitty gritty. I want to see bloods. I want to see bloods before and after of this exercise. How hard would it be?
Mhm.
But you do have to be very, very careful. So that's one of the reasons the studies aren't being done. The other reason is that dry food companies don't want the answer. They don't want the answer that carbohydrates is not in anyone's. But every time there's 3 or 4 really impressive studies done in sled dogs on carbohydrate usage in sled dogs,
Mhm.
and there isn't a single study that concludes carbohydrates is a good idea here. It's always the opposite. There was a fantastic one. Reynolds is the guy that does a lot of them, and he's obsessed with blueberries for some reason, and but he's some quality studies. He said, right, what's the difference between running my dogs on 20% protein kibble,
Mhm.
25% protein, 30% protein kibble, and 40% protein kibble? And what he found was that the teams that ran on 20% protein kibble all had numerous injuries at the end of the trial. It was like over a couple of weeks or months of training, and
Mhm.
the dogs in the high protein kibble had none. And it was a progressive decrease in joint injuries up until the more amount of protein you fed the dog. And I
Mhm.
was thinking, wow, this is impressive. The more protein, but it totally stands to reason, because that's what your joints are made of. If you want your dogs to have solid joints, you've got to feed them joints. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's like Lego. Muscle feeds your muscle, cartilage feeds your cartilage, which is where all your glucosamine and chondroitin and glucagon and glutathione, all the stuff that
Yep.
your joints need is in there, and your omegas and everything your joint. And then bone feeds bone. So that sort of stuff, that's how your dog forms. So if you want a robust little dog from the age of 3.5 weeks, as soon as he comes off the nipple, you are onto the food that your mum ate in a ground up pre-made way. And then you're onto meat and bone and eating bones and stuff, and easing off the carbs. You don't want heavy pups. This
Mhm.
idea of a cute fat pup, there's nothing cute about a fat kid. There's nothing at all. So you're only looking at joint degradation. And then and then not neutering your dog early. Most importantly for anybody exercising their dogs in a
Yeah.
serious way.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny. Just on that, you often see these, these overfed, puppies that are, got these little pot bellies on them, and they're selling for $5,000 to $7,000.
Crazy. It's crazy. Now, if it doesn't cost that money, there's something wrong. It's like,
I
no,
know.
I don't want a cute dog. It's like, what are you like? We've got a mega problem with that in Ireland. It's all oodles. If it doesn't have oodle at the name, they're not going to buy it, and they'll pay anything. Just somebody could cross the dog with a poodle, and they'll charge $2,500,
Crazy.
$4,000 for it.
Yeah. Before we move on, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, the blueberries and, the study that he obviously you mentioned he loves to add blueberries versus non-blueberries and how that assisted.
Yeah, it was. I'm going to find the exact study here now, so I can read you out the exact results.
Yeah.
So I think it was Reynolds here. I hope I quoted him right.
Yeah.
But he was measuring the fitness in his dogs.
Yep.
Let's see. No, that wasn't the one. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he's constantly using blueberries. But he was doing like aerobic fitness of the dogs, and he found he could improve like a huge array of blood readings just for giving. And the only thing he changed was a handful of blueberries on top of the food. We know that the folate and vitamin B and anthocyanins and stuff in blueberries like preserve cognitive ability. They improve performance in mice and rats and stuff. So we knew that this was going to be the case, but he's kind of measuring it in the sled dogs. But I can't, unless I just spend about 20 seconds going through it, couldn't be bothered. But the results were staggering. What I'll do is I'll send you the link to the study when I'm finished, and you get the abstract and you can get the exact paragraph, because it was kind of like, it wasn't just one or two things that improved. It was just this resoundingly impressive results. And it's like from feeding a handful of blueberries.
Yeah.
And so what he does is, and his tip was just brilliant, I tell it to everybody, it's a handful of blueberries every couple of days thrown out into the bushes. And it's like, there you go, dog, use your brain, use your sniffer, and it burns calories, and it's behavioral enrichment, and it's everything. Feed your dog off the ground, but it's also soil probiotics. One of the reasons that they bury their bones is people like, listen, this is a dog whose his whole face is a nose, and 25% of his brain is cognitive, is behavioral, olfactory. So like the idea that him digging a little shallow grave for a bone and giving it a light dust in the muck is going to stop that from some other dog finding is kind of a bit ridiculous. Like any animal will find that, but what they're probably doing is covering it in soil, because now we know there's a huge teeming life in soil, and they need to eat that. So soil probiotics are being used for gut issues and stuff. So now the blueberry trick is that, yes, blueberry is a good addition for your dog, a little bits here and there, no problem. Probably the only fruit I would give. I don't think dogs need a whole lot of fruit, but I feed them off the ground. Any small round bits of food I can get, that I straight away think I'm putting out the grass, into the muck, into the trees. And I've got a little Cocker Spaniel who's just insane. So he just needs this exercise. So I would nearly throw wet food out into the grass and go, eat that, buddy. I do believe that's a really healthy way to do it. But I'll send you a link to the blueberry study.
If that's okay, and I can link it in the group and also in the show notes as well. Sort of just moving on as well. While we're talking about performance dogs, etc. I know that I heard you talk about previously a bit of Himalayan salt and electrolytes and stuff like that. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, listen, so do I. I want to learn more, but again, these experiments that aren't being done. So I've actually, there's somebody in the US now doing it, and I've already been chatting to her, so she's going to take the bull by the horn. So here's the idea.
Yep.
If you've got a dog with GI issues, gut issues, what you would do is fasting is brilliant. Fasting is brilliant for everybody. You were just telling me about how important resting is. I've no doubt. I know that the Irish rugby team, resting was the thing that they have kind of accredited for the last 4 or 5 years of increasing the performance of the lads. It's actually resting and letting those kind of getting them off the exercise for a little while was important. So I think with anyway, with a dog with recurring gut issues, we would fast the dog for 24 hours, okay, with an adult, and stop digestion, because digestion takes up a huge amount of energy, okay? And so you stop fasting, and the thing we used to always leave out is electrolyte water. So if you have a really bad diarrhea, you need good water. So 2 types of water should be left out for a dog with GI issues. The first type is always filtered water. Dogs don't like chlorinated water. They don't want tap water. They've got this super sensitive sniffer. You put out this chlorine gas riddled liquid, they'll drink it if they have to. But if you've got gastrointestinal issues, you've got gut flora issues, don't be putting chlorine on top of it. You're trying to fix it, you know? So that's why they drink rotten puddles. And you go, bloody hell, dog, I give you tap water at home. Why do you have to drink that horrible looking puddle? It's because your tap water is rotten. So I would give them boiled and cooled water, or filtered water, or water that's been sitting out for 24 hours, the gas comes off it, or even a stick of charcoal is a cool tip for anybody. Any gym bunnies that are using a lot of bottles water, get yourself a charcoal stick that sits in those bottles. It takes all the impurities out, the BPA, all the plastic, and you can boil the charcoal stick every 20-30 days to get rid of all the impurities and put it back in the bowl. Dead cool. So here we are with this electrolyte water. You've got plain filtered water for a dog with gut issues, and you've got a second bowl of water, which I would put in a healthy, maybe start with a mug. I'd put a healthy pinch of fancy salt, anything with a name, Himalayan rock salt, Oriel sea salt, pink salt, it doesn't matter. Good quality, unrefined salt where all the minerals are. Minerals you've never heard about, like strobium and all sorts of things. The main thing is it contains a lot of electrolytes, potassium, selenium, things, small amounts of it, fair enough, but the science on salt is completely confused. It used to be that too much salt is going to kill you. Well, actually, the science on salt studies are really confused now with the fact that people eating salt diets have terrible diets. And so it's hard to tease apart that science. And the guy that's really ramping forward the science is now kind of saying, what we know of salt is ridiculous. Don't be too afraid of good quality salt, which is heartening because I love salt. So anyway, pinch of salt in the water, and then a teaspoon of local honey, because dogs need energy, and local honey is antibacterial, it's antifungal, it's just so good for you on many levels. And if you've got allergies, it's good to have the local honey because that's what helps to reduce you. So far better than Manuka honey, which is half the stuff probably isn't Manuka honey, is you actually use your local honey because it's got the local antigens in there. So that's a really good tip. Anyway, you get that in the mug, you top it up with a bit of hot water, and you pour that into a bowl of fresh water. So your dog, it's called Zoo Pharmacosy. Check it out, guys, online. Zoo Pharmacosy, PHARMACOGNOSY, Zoo Pharmacosy, which means the animal choosing its own medicine.
Yeah.
And it's coined by a girl over in the UK, Caroline Ingraham. It's fascinating. And she's flown all around the world, and she presents the sick animal with a range of herbs and says, what do you want, buddy? What do you need? You need some ground up garlic? Do you need some ground up nettle leaf? What do you need to fix you? So if you put out normal water and electrolyte water, for the sake of a better word, dogs in certain conditions with gut issues will eat the electrolyte water if they need it. But also, so will sporting dogs before and after a race, when they start to understand when this electrolyte water is coming out, because fast sprint exercises consumes mega amounts of electrolytes, particularly the higher intensity stuff. Your electrolytes just churn out. Okay, so you sweat them all out. And so you need to replace them. This is why guys that know what they're doing in the gym, and that is not me, would use a lot of these electrolyte drinks. You see, it's why the guys in the pitch are getting electrolyte drinks. They know exactly what they're doing and putting in there. It's the same with your dogs, except we don't provide that to dogs. We just expect, well, it'll be in your next meal, it'll be in your next meal. But actually, you've got a serious athlete here doing some serious weight. So you need to provide them with more of a selection. And it's like, right, buddy, what do you need? I mean, wouldn't it be great when you're feeding the dog that instead of it all being mixed in a bowl and presented to him, that it's in 10 bowls? And it's like, do you like chicken, pork, beef, reindeers, nuts? Do you like whatever? And you portion out the food and say, what do you need, dog? And let him eat what he wants. Initially, dogs are pigs and they'll just eat whatever. Yeah, I have no faith in my dog at all. But that's called ad lib feeding. Okay, so ad lib is the way. So they do it to see how much carbohydrates a dog will choose normally. So when you do ad lib feeding of protein, fat, and carbs to dogs over time, what they'll do is they'll start to pig out on the fat initially, feast or famine. Fat is a very high commodity for dogs because you don't get fat animals in the wild, and it's the most amount of energy. So they pig out on the fat, but very quickly they start reducing the fat and incorporating more protein. And dogs don't include carbohydrates. 7% is the most amount of carbohydrates they use when they're given free range to eat whatever they want. So I think we should take those studies. We know they don't want these carbohydrates, but take that to the racing dogs and say, or the performance dogs, and say, right, guys, what do you need before and after your race? Because they'll learn very quickly, particularly after the race initially. So what I would love to do, Dan, as I was saying to you, is that we would have any performance dogs that, you're all in teams, you're all mad into this stuff. You are far more switched on to what dogs need than anybody that looks at this, include me and anybody else like me, looking in on these sports. We don't really, we just try out these ideas, but it's you guys that have to do it. And so you would get 5, 6, 8 dogs, I was thinking like a laser timer. I was thinking we got a lot of lurchers here in Ireland, so we'd use lurchers. And we say, right, 400-meter dash, guys. Let's see what you can do. And because the differences are so infinitesimal, you'd have to repeat it. A few dogs,
Mhm.
keep them on this diet. And then to the other group of dogs, I would have them consume electrolyte water before or after. I'd say, look, guys, there's the water if you need it, and you can take what you want. Some people were dividing out the water and putting the honey in one water and salt in the other, different concentrations of salt. But I'm kind of saying that the dogs will take as much salt as they need. They're not just going to go for the different types of salt. They'll just take what salt they need and walk away.
Mhm.
So it'd be nice to measure how much of this salt went in, how much of the salty water your dogs drank, and most importantly, what effect did it have on the dog? Did it increase performance? Did it increase recovery? How do you measure recovery? On and on and on. So that is a real ripe plum, and it's so easy to measure and do. It's not invasive, so you don't have to go for ethics
Yep.
approval. And yeah, that's something everyone should be doing. So it's just a handy tip.
Yeah, and it's awesome actually. And actually, it's funny that so my next guest in the morning is from America, and she specialises in lure coursing. And in America they've got they call it fast cat. So it's a hundred yard dash. It's a new
Oh yeah.
competition. It's a new competition open to all dogs, mixed breeds as well. So I'm going to get into it in obviously our next podcast. But it's a 100 yard dash run by the Kennel Club. In America called fast cats, and it's basically a straight line 100 yard dash, all breeds.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what animal do you expect is going to win that? You were talking about greysters there. I'd never heard of them. What animal wins that 100-yard dash?
I think actually I read that today it was a mixed breed greyhound that was that took out the quickest dog last year, but it wasn't a it was
It
not a
wasn't a
pure
greyhound.
It wasn't a purebred greyhound, no. But in saying that, though, we'd have to look at the entries and find out how many purebred
Yeah.
grey.
What sort of? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
And I suppose that the greyhounds are over 400 meters, I think. So really, it's kind of like the horses. A horse will beat you over 1,000 meters, but the greyhound will win 400 meters. But what wins like 100 meters? That's interesting.
exactly.
100-meter
And
dash.
the other thing was, greyhound racing is very big. There wasn't $1 million in prize money for this, so you know. There's a race
Yeah.
here in
Yeah.
Australia that you get $1 million, you win the race. This is just your average mum and dad Joe that is
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
want to do something else with their dogs to help burn some energy to just
Yeah.
get out and about. That's who's participating in that sport, not your greyhound
Yeah, true.
professional.
Okay. Okay. So you haven't really sampled the top lads just to see how that would do. See, all this stuff is so interesting. I want this stuff measured. And I
Yep.
want to measure whatever about the salt, coming back to the
Mm.
carbohydrate thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I know some of the Canicross people are way ahead of this than I am because I don't practice it and see it.
Mhm.
But they are using some carbohydrates at certain times. Now I'm not going to quote them
Mhm.
when they use it because I'm just going to butcher it. But she on the basis that they have these fast twitch muscles, they do provide a little bit of this sugar. But interestingly, uh, Noakes is the kind of guy from South Africa who wrote the Law of Running. He's the top. He's just a really big guy in ultra in marathon running initially, but now it's
Yeah.
ultra endurance.
Mhm.
And so he wrote the book The Law of Running, big seller, and the chapter on nutrition. He says he still loves the book, but the chapter
Mhm.
on nutrition you can throw out because he was the guy that led us to carb loading. He was the guy that said pasta before your races, your
Mhm.
energy drinks before your race. When actually, unless you're doing a 100-meter dash,
Mhm.
that's absolutely not the way you want to fuel your body because very quickly you're going to hit the wall because the
Mhm.
body wants to move into the glycolytic system for slow output but long pursuit of that.
Yep.
So there's 26 for marathon runners. That was bad advice. And so now he's saying, like, I'm really sorry about that, guys. So now he's the voice for keto. And he's
Yep.
like, no, absolutely no carbohydrates, high fat, medium protein. And so it's interesting that he's done it about turn. So I'm thinking, well, if he still doesn't put sugar in, then I'm wondering perhaps for different exercises, different types of dogs, as you've just highlighted, because I am stuck in this whole greyhound or sled dogs thing. You've
Yeah.
just highlighted the fact that there's just ridiculous variations of intensity there. And so really, how do we tweak the diet? Because it's totally
Mhm.
untapped. It's so exciting. There's so
Mhm.
much we can do
Yeah.
here, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and then sort of just taking it back, my last podcast guest was a local here in Australia that does weight pull. So that his bull terrier was pulling 1,000 kilograms of weight over 5 meters.
What? No.
Yes, yeah, on a cart. 100%, man.
No, you mean 1,000 pounds
No,
or
no,
1,000?
he almost hit 1,000 kilos. So he built up. We went into it.
Could I pull the 1,000 kilos?
Oh, potentially. Hey, a bit of training, and we'll get you
Oh,
there.
how big? Yeah, how
you know,
big is the bull terrier?
roughly what I think it's well, 25 to 30 kilos, depending on
That
the.
is
Yeah.
insane. That is
Mm,
an insane output
yep.
from an
100%.
animal.
So over 5 meters, and you'll see potentially weight pull dogs in America pulling crazy amounts over 5 meters. But once
Right.
again, building up, and they're different. One's a cart on different surfaces as well.
Yeah,
One's
yeah.
also on a track, and the tracks tends to slide a bit better. So
Okay,
that
yeah, I like the sound of a track. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so and then we've been doing it with a modified human fitness sled as well. So
Oh, yeah,
we spoke about earlier the dragging chains, but we've been dragging chains over a kilometer rather than doing
yeah,
the short bursts over five
yeah,
meters of
yeah.
probably we'll probably aim build up to maybe one times body weight. So I've got a GSP, we'll build up to 33 kilos for him,
Interesting.
over 5 meters. So yeah, it all varies there. And so there's so many different activities and so much output and so many different training styles that we can go,
Yeah.
hey, it all starts with nutrition though.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Like you're so man for that, Dan. From the very start, you were saying that, like, this pyramid of performance. So it's kind of like you've got to get your foundations right. There's no point. We all know the stories of taking out this overweight, neutered early Labrador and cold running them and saying, right, sprint after that tennis ball. You're going to
Mhm.
snap cruise.
Yep.
So, like, you're so right about this foundation thing, where even the way you approach exercise, which was not something I was aware of. So, like, you say, oh, no, you don't need to explode out your heart in the first 3 or 4 weeks. We're just going to get you sauntering into this. Let's just get you at a basic level, and we don't need to go into this ridiculously high tempo, high BPM exercise,
Mhm.
which is nice to hear, because most people hit the gym and go, I'm going to be having to do a spin class for an hour and come out bawling, crying.
Yeah.
Who
And
wants to do that? How is
and
that a way to start exercise? Get into that maybe down the road if you're into it, but, like, that's for advanced,
mm,
guys that shouldn't be in the gym anymore, sort of look.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
You
And
know.
and you touched on it earlier about we need time for muscles, ligaments, tendons
Yep.
to
Yep.
adapt.
Yeah.
Also our neural pathways to adapt as well.
Yeah. 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 I like that. Yeah.
So,
Uh,
so I believe so do dogs.
yeah.
So we
Yeah.
transfer it over to our dogs in our training. We think they're bulletproof.
Yeah.
They're often, yes, they are. In, like, if we look at Canning Cross, they're generally much fitter than us from the get
Yeah.
go. However, we
Yeah.
still need to make sure that we apply those rules of adaptation to get the
Yeah.
most out of the dog.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. What about using heat and cold after races? Has anybody done that, like providing a cold mat and a hot mat?
You wouldn't believe it. Not in dogs. I have just started following Wim Hof, crazy, crazy guy from the Netherlands, jumping
Yeah.
in, walking up mountains in his board shorts.
Oh,
Um,
no. No, no, no.
cold
I don't
emerge.
want.
I've just started doing, ice baths every Friday night after my weight session. I'm
Why,
now
man?
I'm
Why?
now at 5 minutes in 2-degree water for five
No.
minutes.
No, my nuts, I couldn't. I did, like, I do understand the sauna thing, jumping into the cold, and we have a dip plunge pool there but, like, I'm the guy screaming jumping into it, and so I would do it just purely because I suppose I have to do it. But
Mhm.
there is no enjoyment jumping into a freezing cold bath after a sauna. Bloody
Oh,
hell!
mate, it is like there's some science coming out about it. Also, breathing techniques as well. Like, I'm super excited. I'm experimenting on myself. Have I
Yeah.
applied that to the dogs yet? No, I haven't.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I know I get the release of endorphins. I know, and in psychology studies, and people with depression, the release of endorphins from jumping into cold water is unreal. So I
Yeah.
do get that, and I've employed it on. Okay, I live by the sea here, so I've got that, and the sea is always cold in Ireland, so you don't have a choice. But yeah, so I wonder, has anybody? I know people use cold. it depends when you use cold. You use cold if you've got a swelling. So every time I do my knee, I'm lying and sitting on the couch with my knee up, rice, isn't it? So it's raise
Yep.
and ice and compress and elevate or whatever it is,
Yep.
rest. And so ice for it's inflamed, but also heat for stiff muscles. I wonder, will dogs choose different temperatured beds? Like,
Mm.
this is the sort of stuff I love. It's just like,
Yeah.
why aren't five? If I was doing this to a big degree and I wanted to win the world championship, somethings, then I would be offering 5 different temperature beds at nighttime.
Yeah.
And so like, what do you want, buddy? And at what times of the day and after what exercise?
Sure.
This is how you're going to get those muscles back firing quicker. And
Hmm.
copying what the rugby teams do, like what you're saying, like you see this ice baths being used, and you kind of say, yeah, like, there's a reason these guys are doing it, because the science is solid on it.
Yeah,
That's why
for sure.
they're doing.
We're just evolving. We're a little bit, a little bit behind in with the dogs, but even just ensuring the massages and that getting their recovery right is super important. So
Yeah.
we're catching up, but podcasts and information like this, talking about it, hopefully
Yeah.
gets some people triggered and go, yeah, let's try this shit.
Yeah, totally. It's so easy. And people love being able to do things at home. You just like being able to do something yourself, as opposed to having to buy in a product or a supplement. I'm not a big believer in supplements. I mean,
Yeah.
totally, it's a different field than I'm in.
Mm.
But I'm, from a basic nutritional point of view, where people put in supplements as the norm, and I am absolutely not. I'm kind of saying, right, listen. First of all, most of it for the average dog under no massive draw, like it would be eating. Should get everything from their food.
Mhm.
And now and again, once a year, just check the bloods and see where they are, as you should do your own,
Yep.
and check and see where you are, and see what's working and what's not working. You might find raw fed dogs are quite low on manganese all the time, because pre-made raw dog food doesn't include hair and feathers, hide, teeth. If you saw that in the product, you'd go, God, this is a bit scaldy looking. It's got feathers and hide in it. When actually, that sort of stuff is the only place you source manganese in a prey animal. So
Mm.
if you cut out hair and feathers and stuff from pre-made raw dog food, you cut out all the manganese. So up until get the book out, there
Mm.
was like no manganese in raw dog food, and the
Yeah.
dogs still did okay, because we cycle through ingredients. We throw them a few bits and pieces now and again. There might be a hairy rabbit here, or they might source something themselves off the ground. You don't need a whole lot of manganese. Like, the point is that we just don't know these things. So I like to have a pre-made a raw dog food that has most of their ingredients, and then instead of just lobbing in supplements without thinking,
Mm.
really going after it with the diet. So the baseline is always at an optimum. So
Yep.
they don't want for these things. And if you think that they need these things, then practice a bit of zoo pharmacology and put them separately down in front of the dog, because they will consume predators and herbivores. Herbivores like cows and deers and stuff. They'll go after legs of birds and all sorts of stuff for calcium.
Yeah.
And carnivores, caterpillars, everything does it. They'll eat certain things to get whatever's in there into them.
Mm.
And carnivores do it. They eat certain parts of prey. And if there's lots of those prey, they'll just leave lots of bodies around and just take the liver or head or whatever.
Yeah.
So I love that sort of idea, and letting the dog choose, but we don't know much about it, so it's an
Yeah.
interesting way of feeding the
Yeah,
dog.
for sure. Look, let's we'll probably just wrap it up there, Dr. Conor. I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time. We've jumped into a number of different subjects. Obviously, we go on for days and days, and about this. Both get super excited and very passionate about that. But I suppose just to finish up, obviously people can grab the book, but where can they find more information about you?
Yeah, so the book is called Feeding Dogs, and for people in Australia, like, the place you're probably going to find it is Amazon. Let's
Yeah.
face it, book depository. So you'll find it there. And my website, though, has a lot of free information on it. I put all my stuff, all my thoughts there. So
Mm.
dogsfirst.ie, dogsfirst.ie,
Mm.
and you can catch me on Facebook, Dogs First. So you can reach me at any of those places, and we can get chatting. And if anybody's interested in doing these sorts of experiments, I don't want to use the word experiment. Actually, I'm treading a fine line there. So if anyone wants to do these home trials, then get in touch, because I'm so interested, and I can help you with layout and that kind of thing.
Mm.
But I just want to hear the results. That's all I care about. So
Yep.
if anyone's thinking about that, get in touch, because you just can't have enough friends doing this stuff. We're
Mm.
just at the start of something here, so
Mm.
it's exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Once again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Daniel. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.